actually know they had a bank account.
Question number 2, Dr. Russell Norman. Order.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Dr. Russell Norman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is to the Minister of Finance and asks, will New Zealanders have money taken from their bank accounts to fund a bank bailout under his proposed open bank resolution scheme?
And before I call the Honourable Stephen Joyce, my office has been advised that this answer may be somewhat longer than normal because it contains quite some detail for the member.
Thank you, Mr.
Honourable Stephen Joyce.
On behalf of the Minister of Finance, I don't agree with the way the member has characterised the open bank resolution scheme. In the highly unlikely event that a New Zealand bank failed and went into statutory management, the open bank resolution scheme would actually help depositors. The bank would reopen the next day and customers would have full or partial access to their funds, which would then be government guaranteed. That situation should be compared with 2 alternatives that would be on offer. One is that the bank would go into liquidation and customers may not have access to any of their funds for a long period. The other would be that the government bail out a bank with taxpayers' money, and that comes with potentially enormous fiscal costs, as we have seen in some countries in Europe. But again, could I stress that this is a very unlikely situation. Our major banks are amongst the most highly rated in the world. They are well capitalised and have come through the global financial crisis in very good shape. And since then, regulatory changes have strengthened New Zealand banks even further.
Supplementary question, Dr. Russell.
Point of order.
Point of order. Dr. Russell Norman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The question was quite specific. Will money be taken out of their bank accounts to fund a bank bailout? I'm no wiser as a result of the Minister's answer.
The answer was very fulsome. Does the member have further supplementaries? You can delve into the
Sure, supplementary.
Supplementary question, Dr. Russell Norman.
What amount is likely to be taken out of Mum and Dad's savers' accounts under his open bank resolution scheme? Will it be 10% of their savings, 20% of their savings, or whatever it takes?
Honourable Stephen Joyce.
Mr. Speaker, I've got to say that I'm actually quite horrified at the member's scaremongering at this point. It is a highly unlikely situation that the member suggests, and the open bank resolution scheme is designed to protect the interests of depositors in the very unlikely situation that a New Zealand bank failed. And I think scaremongering mum and dad investors about the sort of percentages they might lose, a la what's happened in Cyprus, which is an entirely different situation, is actually pretty irresponsible.
Supplementary question, Honourable Clayton Cosgrove.
To the Minister, having guaranteed the big end of town with the covered bonds legislation currently moving through the House, will he commit to implementing Labor's proposal to protect the deposits of ordinary New Zealanders, which would ensure that the first $30,000 of all bank deposits are guaranteed? If not, why not?
Honourable Stephen Joyce.
Mr. Speaker, I actually struggle with the member's question because I'm pretty sure, sitting in this House over the last 3 or 4 years, that the member and his colleagues have been massively critical of the outcome of the government's bank deposit scheme in terms of its protection of finance companies' depositors, and now suddenly he's of a view that somehow the government should step in again and protect depositors. No, it wasn't wasted. It was not wasted at all. It was actually protecting the interests through the retail deposit guarantee scheme of New Zealand depositors.
Michael Cullum scheme.
Point of order, Honourable Clayton Cosgrove.
That didn't even get anywhere near the question. I simply asked, having guaranteed through the retail deposit guarantees legislation the big end of town, would he commit to implementing the proposal we put forward? He talked about the retail deposit guarantee scheme and responded to an interjection, but he never answered or even addressed that question, sir.
And the Minister said he didn't accept the proposition that was put by the member. If the member wishes to ask further supplementaries, he has the ability to do so. Supplementary question. Is the member questioning my ruling?
Mr. Speaker.
Then it's a fresh point of
It is,
order.
Mr. Speaker.
Then it's not to do with the question that's just
The
been
Minister
answered.
said he was struggling, sir.
Order.
Which is a different set of wording to the
Order.
wording
That
you
is
provided.
now relitigating the question, the decision I've just made. Supplementary question, Dr. Russell Norman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Is the Minister saying that it is not part of the open bank resolution scheme to access depositors' accounts in order to fund a bank bailout?
Honourable Stephen Joyce.
Mr. Speaker, I think possibly it might be helpful for the House, given the member has raised the issue, to take them through what actually does occur with open bank resolution, which addresses the member's question. Open bank resolution is one option for responding to if a bank failure occurred. It actually helps depositors because it allows for a bank to reopen the next day, hence the name Open Bank Resolution, and means that customers would be able to get full or partial access to their accounts and other banking services while an appropriate long-term solution to the failure of a bank would be identified. Some of their deposits could be frozen in the short term, but the remainder would be available on the next business day and would actually be government guaranteed. If you look at the alternative, Mr. Speaker, if a bank went into liquidation, that process would be complex and time-consuming, during which time customers would not have any access to their funds. In any event, the first losses will be borne by the bank's shareholders. The OBR follows the usual order of credit preference as much as possible, and it is also not intended to be the only option in the event that a bank would get into a difficulty. I would also point out to the member that this has been in the public domain since 2011 and has been raised and addressed by the Reserve Bank a number of times since then.
Point of order, Dr. Russell Norman.
Mr. Speaker, question time doesn't make sense if it's not also answer time. It was a very direct question. He hasn't answered the question.
Order. That was a very genuine attempt by the Minister. Order. I'm on my feet, and if members want to stay to see the whole of question time, they'll be silent while I'm on my feet. The Minister made a genuine attempt to explain open bank resolution. The answer may not be to the satisfaction of the member. The member has at this stage further supplementaries if he wants to use them. Point of order, Right Honourable Winston.
It's a question, Speaker.
Sorry?
It's a question.
Supplementary question, Right Honourable Winston Peters.
Could I ask the Minister why would he prefer an open bank resolution scheme which, in part or wholly, in extreme circumstances, could see the depositor having all their money stopped from their use, rather than a very sound scheme announced by myself in 2008, October. Well, we were there before you even dreamt about it, OK?
Order.
In 2008, which would have this effect, which would have the effect of a government guarantee for the first $100,000 of a deposit in a New Zealand-owned bank.
Honourable Stephen Joyce.
Mr. Speaker, on behalf of the Minister of Finance, I could think of a number of issues with the member's proposal immediately, because what he would be proposing to do would be to guarantee a certain number of deposits in a New Zealand-owned bank, which would mean suddenly all the money would move, particularly in a difficult situation like we had with the GFC, from other banks that weren't necessarily New Zealand-owned, and that would collapse the other banks, which I don't think would be in the interest of the financial stability of the New Zealand economy. Right, so we should actually, here's what Mr. Peters is suggesting in a xenophobic way, is that we should collapse all the foreign-owned banks into the New Zealand. Thank goodness he was not in Cabinet during the global financial crisis.
Supplementary question, Dr. Russell Norman.
Will he guarantee that mums and dads will have at least $1,000 left in their accounts after an open bank resolution of a failing bank?
Mr.
Honourable
Speaker, on behalf
Stephen
of the Minister of
Joyce.
Finance, the member is deliberately scaremongering yet again about the New Zealand economy. What I can say to the member is this.
Order. It's a relatively easy question to answer.
It's a straight question. Yep. He started abusing me for what? He should just answer the question.
Order. 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 Would the Minister please answer the question?
Well, Mr. Speaker, the member raises a hypothetical which is just impossible to answer, because he suggests that everybody should get $1,000 out, whether they've got it in there or not. The point is this. you can only have, if a bank, in the very unlikely event that a bank falls over, there is two options. One is that people lose their shirts. The other option is the taxpayer pays, or the third option is the open bank resolution scheme, which ensures an orderly process which actually has the best chance of protecting a depositor's deposits. And that is actually the options on the table. So the member has criticised the idea of taxpayers bailing out depositors. He's presumably not in favour of depositors losing their shirts. So can I suggest to him he looks closely and positively at the open bank resolution scheme?
Supplementary question, Dr. Russell Norman.
So can the minister please explain to me that his answer to my last question, will he guarantee that mums and dads will have at least $1,000 left in their accounts after open bank resolution? His answer was no.
Honourable Stephen
About
Joyce.
the Minister of Finance, the point is that it's hypothetical and it actually doesn't take into account anybody's situation. Look, I appreciate the member would just print some money and give it back to the depositors, but actually, and here's a guy who claims to be concerned about people's deposits, but he'd actually inflate of those deposits away.
Order. Point of order.
Straightforward question. The minister had answered it. Time to wrap it up.
It was a very political question and it got a very political answer back again. Has the member... Supplementary question, Dr. Russell Norman.
Why doesn't he draw a strong line in the sand and protect mum and dad deposits, as they do in Australia and the United States, using deposit insurance, and pick a minimum that would be protected, such as $250,000, as is the case in Australia and the United States?
Honourable Stephen Joyce on behalf of the Minister of Finance.
Mr Speaker, this is a member who's arguing against taxpayers stumping up for deposits one minute, and now he's arguing for it at the moment.
Would the member please repeat his question?
Okay. Why doesn't he draw a line in the sand and protect mum and dad deposits for a certain minimum level, such as $250,000, like they do in Australia and the United States? It's a simple question.
Honourable Stephen Joyce.
And, Mr Speaker, on behalf of the Minister of Finance, I was pointing out to the member that what he is proposing is that effectively taxpayers stand behind those depositors, which is what happens, as I understand it, in these offshore arrangements, and he's also proposing, well, even if it's not the taxpayers, then all he's going to do is make the depositors pay insurance every year, forever, in the unlikely event of this actually occurring. And actually, the far bigger issue that depositors would have with the value of their deposits would be if the government got out the printing presses and printed money and inflated the value of the deposits away.
Supplementary question, Dr. Russell Norman.
Why does he propose stealing savers' money while they sleep, when a fairer alternative would be to have the banks pay to insure themselves against failure, like they do in nearly every other OECD country?
Honourable Stephen Joyce.
Mr Speaker, I'm sorry, that's a preposterous political statement suggesting you'd steal money from people's accounts. The member is outrageously scaremongering once again in his own political interest. He has an appalling take on the New Zealand economy, and how he thinks that what he's proposing now fits with his idea to print money and inflate the value of people's deposits away is actually completely beyond me. It's totally inconsistent.
Point of order, Dr. Russell Norman.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I seek leave to table a letter from January this year seeking information under the OAA from Treasury about open bank resolution alternatives that they've explored, a letter that hasn't been met yet.
A letter from the member himself?
From my researcher to Treasury.
Leave a sort to table that letter. Any objection? There is objection.
Point of order.
Point of order, Dr. Russell Norman.
I seek leave to table a letter from the Reserve Bank back to us saying that they would not be meeting our request within the time frame because they haven't got the information.
A letter from the Reserve Bank back to the Green Party. Any objection to that being tabled? There is. It won't be tabled. Question number 3, Todd McLeay.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. To the Minister of Finance.